Hello everyone. Smell that? That spring is in the air. Of course, if you live in the south, it's 3 inches of pollen on your car. And if you're like me and you live in the north near Chicago, it could be 3 inches of snow because old man winter smells, not spring. I'm waiting for a day in the 60s. Oh, I can't wait. But anyways, enough of that. Are you ready to launch? Well, please listen to the following instructions. Put your tray tables in the upright position. Fasten your seatbelts because you know what time it is. It's time for your top 5 to stay alive. Here we go. Topic number 1. Ever since the very first artificial sweetener came out in 1897, chemical companies and food manufacturers have realized that sweetness without calories is worth its weight in gold. And while we've heard some really bad news about these fake sweeteners, especially aspartame, they continue to crop up in the supermarket in more and more products. And I can't for the life of me understand, with all the negative information out there, why someone would order a product containing aspartame. I recently was eating at a restaurant, and right next to me was a beautiful family of 4, 2 small children, and guess what? They ordered 4 Diet Cokes. To my horror, I can't believe it. When are these people going to learn? But I know what you're thinking. Dr. Harry, I never order aspartame because I order sucralose, better known as Splenda. I'm sure you've seen the ads that show how it's just a sugar, but with only a tiny fraction of the calories. And sure, it may start out that way, but once it's been chemically manipulated, the end product no more resembles sugar than a cleaning product under your sink does. If you switch to Splenda or some generic version of sucralose as your go-to sweetener, the time has come to take a long, hard look at these little packets and see them for exactly what they are, a dietary wolf in sheep's clothing. Because there's nothing sweet about what sucralose can do to your gut. In 1976, a young scientist was told to test a new compound called sucralose, but he mistakenly thought he was supposed to taste it. Lo and behold, it was sweet, resulting in another eureka moment in the laboratory. That's how the Splenda website tells its story, but here's what the brand won't tell you. Perhaps if the worker had done his job right and actually tested the chemical the way he was supposed to, we wouldn't have millions of people consuming an artificial sweetener that's now known to be devastating to the gut. And that's just for starters. Several new studies have come out revealing just how bad this seemingly benign sweetener can be for your health. Researchers have found that it can trigger a metabolic syndrome, an umbrella term for conditions that significantly up the risk of heart disease, promote diabetes, worsen Crohn's and other inflammatory bowel diseases, and cause an overgrowth of pathogens such as E. coli in your intestines. Sounds good, doesn't it? But that's not all. 2 years ago, researchers from the Ramanzi Institute, a nonprofit consumer group out of Italy, found that sucralose could cause leukemia and other blood cancers in laboratory mice. Lead scientist Dr. Mirando Sofriti sounded the alarm bells, even presenting his evidence at the Childhood Cancer Conference held in London. But the big corporations that profit from artificial sweeteners are extremely powerful, and they were able to shoot down Dr. Sofriti's research as some kind of internet rumor. Well, these corporations can't do that with all these new studies, that's for sure. And with the growing body of evidence coming out about the harmful effects of sucralose, it's getting difficult to continue to sweep it under the rumor rug. In these latest findings, researchers from Case Western Reserve School of Medicine said that patients with Crohn's need to think carefully about using Splenda or generic forms of sucralose. The researchers discovered how the sweeteners can cause an overgrowth of E. coli bacteria, deplete beneficial gut bacteria, and cause inflammation and disease flare-ups. And that was all in 6 weeks, just what someone with irritable bowel disease needs, right? Scientists at George Washington University in D.C. recently also discovered that at a cellular level, people who consumed sucralose had an increased glucose uptake and adipogenesis, which is a technical term for formation of fat. And guess who found to be more prone to these adverse effects? Why, none other than the people who are already struggling with their weight. In a very telling comment, a George Washington University research that said that artificial sweeteners, all of them, can have the same negative effects of real sugar, such as inflammation, insulin spikes, and weight gain. But I'll go beyond that statement and say they're much worse for the health than any real sweeteners. Ones such as raw honey and maybe maple syrup, we talked about last month, even have numerous bona fide health benefits. Like these sweeteners, like these sweet fakes have gone far beyond just diet drinks. Once the FDA approves an additive, the sky's the limit as to where it will turn up. That means that you're going to have to carefully check labels on all kinds of products to avoid them. Sucralose is just one of several. It is also branded in thousands of processed foods, including yogurt, cereals, snack bars, tea, and juice. And while you're checking those labels, also leave any products containing aspartame, neotame, acesulfame K right on the shelf where you find them. Bad news, people. Topic number 2. If you didn't have Meow Mix for breakfast, I've got some frightening news for you today. If you've ever had a vaccine, from shingles inoculation to a flu shot, it's pretty certain that you were injected with a needle full of contaminants. But how do I know? When your own doctor can't even tell you what's in it? Because in a major study out of Europe, researchers tested 44 vaccines with cutting-edge equipment, including super high-resolution electron microscopes. That sounds official. And they found contaminants in all but one of those vaccines they tested. The one vaccine that was honest to goodness, pure, uncontaminated, and actually safe, it was for cats. Wow. This ought to scare the heck out of anyone who gets vaccines, and for more than one reason. Hey, I like cats. We should be nice to all God's creatures, but can't we treat humans at least as well as we treat the kitties? Apparently not, because the rest of the vaccines in the study, the human doses, all contain hodgepodge of scary ingredients that no sane human or feline would ever want injected into their body. Inside those vaccines, researchers found micro, submicro, and nano-sized inorganic foreign bodies, and not one of them was declared on a list of ingredients or in that teeny tiny ultrafine print in the little origami brochures that are stuffed into the packages. They found enough metals to open a black chip shop, including lead, stainless steel, tungsten, and titanium. And as long as we're going into the business with what was found in those vaccines, we can also open a jewelry store too, because they found both gold and silver. These and other compounds found in the vaccines can trigger immediate problems such as autoimmune reactions, like when you get all swollen up after a shot. In those cases, at least you know there's something could be wrong. But what about over the long term? Who knows what will happen when those metals are hauled off around in your body and decide to park inside a vital organ or two. Now, plenty of studies have tried to take vaccines down in the past, and those of us in the know understand many of the risks involved in getting jabbed, especially with those vaccines that had been previously rejected over safety concerns and then miraculously considered fine. But in this case, the researchers behind the study didn't set out to break open a new scandal. If anything, they probably thought they were going to put the issue of vaccine safety to bed once and for all. And yet they were stunned by what they uncovered. We have never questioned the purity of vaccines before, Dr. Antoinette Gatti told researchers James Lyons Wheeler. All injectable solutions had to be perfectly pure, and that was an act of faith on which it seemed impossible to have doubts. Acts of faith are great in church, but vaccines weren't sent down to us from heavens. They were created in big pharma labs. Dr. Gatti went on to say that she and her team were so shocked, in fact, that they repeated their analysis several times just to be certain. In the end, they had to accept the evidence because we can't rely on acts of faith to ensure that these shots are safe. We need acts of science. And the science right now is saying that it's time to reconsider everything your doctor wants to inject inside you until you can be darn sure that we all know what's in it. Topic number 3. It seemed like such a good idea at first. a place where you or your child could go for very minor surgical procedures in and out with no need to go to the hospital. Why, you'd be home recuperating in a few hours. But now, almost 5 decades after the first outpatient surgery was opened, those facilities are doing complex operations and every kind of test you can imagine, and these procedures are frequently performed on high-risk patients who should only be dealt with in real hospitals. Perhaps, however, the most frightening part of this surgery center surge is that a recent investigation uncovered many are not even equipped to deal with emergencies because either they don't have the right medical equipment or their staff members aren't properly trained. So before you're allowing yourself or a loved one to receive any kind of treatment at one of these facilities, there are 3 vital questions that we need to ask, and we'll get to those in a second. It would be an understatement to say that we all shocked to hear of Joan Rivers' death 4 years ago. After all, she was simply having a routine endoscopy done at a surgical center in Manhattan. How could anything so simple have killed her? But things went downhill fast, and by the time the 81-year-old comedian arrived at the hospital, she had been without oxygen for too long to revive her. While the world now knows what happened to Rivers, I'm sure that you've never heard about MacArthur Robertson, who died on his way home after undergoing upper spine surgery, or 12-year-old Ruben van Veldenheim, who coated blue on the table while having his tonsils removed, or Paulina Tam, who basically suffocated to death when internal bleeding cut off the air supply. Those deaths and many others that have happened after or during procedures at these surgical centers didn't have to occur, experts say, and they probably wouldn't have if the victims had been treated at hospitals where staff members are fully trained on how to open airways and get the hearts beating again. Sandra Walls, for example, had a simple sinus procedure done at the surgery center of Oklahoma last year, but she suffered a bad reaction to the anesthesia. In a regular hospital, she would have most likely been held for observation. The surgery center, however, released her a few hours later, and when her husband, who thought she was merely napping in the car, got her home, he found that she had died. Since we almost never hear about these tragedies unless celebrities are involved, you may be wondering how many deaths have occurred at these pseudo-hospitals. Actually, no one really knows. We do know that thousands of calls have been made to 911 from surgical centers, but deaths aren't counted by local or federal authorities. It took a long investigation by USA Today, Kaiser Health News, and a team of journalists across the country to track down 260 deaths during the last 4 years, and much of that information was hiding in the courthouse papers or internal investigations. But get this, over 10 years ago, a Medicare investigation revealed that surgery centers don't often have patient safety standards that are consistent with what hospitals are required to have. Many don't train staff in what to do in a crisis or even stock the right emergency supplies. And until 3 years ago, Medicare wouldn't cover things such as spinal surgeries at these centers. But after a big push from many of the doctors who own them, it was suddenly okay. And since so many patients are being steered toward getting procedures done at surgery centers, perhaps even you or a loved one, how can you protect yourself? Here are the 3 questions I talked about earlier. Number 1, find out if the doctor has a financial interest in the surgical center he's recommending. If so, that should prompt questions about the necessity of a procedure and how safe it is to have it done at that location instead of a hospital. Number 2, speak with the staff at the surgery center and ask what safety measures are at the ready should something go wrong. Follow up with a question about how far away the nearest hospital is. And number 3, are you a high-risk patient? Doctors routinely score patients on their anesthesia risk based on their general health, but 48 states allow people with any risk factor to be operated on in a surgical center. And don't be fooled into thinking that because some of these locations specialize in a procedure such as spinal surgery, that it means it must be safe. As Tam's son Eric said, we didn't expect the worst to happen, but as we all know, it can. And at least if you're being cared for in real honest-to-goodness hospital, the worst doesn't have to mean the end. Topic number 4. Having gout is like walking a tightrope over the Grand Canyon. It's one of the most excruciating pains you can have, but the drugs dispensed to treat it are some of the most dangerous ones you can take. What a choice. Now, the latest warning to hit the fan is about Uloric. During a meeting of the American College of Cardiology last week, it was announced that patients taking Uloric have a significantly higher risk of dying than those taking another extremely risky gout med. It's enough for anyone suffering from this disease of kings to want to toss all of their prescription drugs used to treat it in the trash. Actually, that's not such a bad idea, considering the fact that there are natural remedies for gout, which we'll get to in a minute, that have been proven time and time again to reduce uric acid and stop that agonizing joint pain in its tracks. No RX required. Uloric was approved in 2009 under a cloud of suspicion that it was causing heart attacks, strokes, and other heart-related deaths when compared to another extremely dangerous gout med called allopurinol. So the FDA told its maker, Takeda Pharmaceuticals, that it would approve its new gout drug under one condition. A 9-year study would have to be conducted to further investigate that risk. You've got to be kidding me. Can you imagine how a patient would feel if they knew that an FDA-approved drug was the subject of an almost decade-long study to find out exactly how dangerous it might be? Shouldn't these questions be answered before a drug is approved? Nevertheless, the trial dubbed CARES, C-A-R-E-S, finished up last year, almost 2 years short of what the FDA asked for. When the preliminary results were released, even the FDA felt obliged to warn consumers, and the agency issued a safety communication about the heart risk findings. And it gets worse. Now that the study results have been tallied, it turns out that the increased chance of dying from taking Uloric isn't just heart-related. It's all-cause proposition. But if you're expecting your doctor to ring you up with a warning, that doesn't sound likely. When a reporter asked the experts at the big cardiology get-together if these findings would rattle clinicians, she was told that if a patient has been on Uloric for years, they're probably going to continue to get it just like anything else. And that should give you an idea of how casual doctors, drug makers, and regulators are when it comes to what? Your life. As far as allopurinol goes, that other popular gout drug I warned you about 2 years ago, how a multinational study found it to be commonly associated with horrific side effects called Stevens-Johnson syndrome, something that can literally cause your skin to peel off your body as if you were being boiled alive. Sounds like fun. And you can bet that clinicians weren't rattled by those findings either. But honestly, there's no reason in the world to take such risks when potent and proven natural remedies are easily available to treat gout. Number one, cherries and cherry juice. It is a number one way to lower uric acid levels and reduce your risk of painful gout attack. One study from the Boston University Medical Center found that eating 10 cherries a day could cut gout flares in half. Other research concluded that the same is true for taking a tablespoon of tart cherry extract twice a day, and you can also find cherry extracts in supplement form. Apple cider vinegar, number 2, is another way to curb uric acid buildup. Simply add 1 to 2 tablespoons to a glass of water and then sip on it periodically throughout the day. Number 3, vitamin C can lower uric acid when you take at least 1,500 milligrams a day. Another way to keep gout flare-up at bay is to substantially reduce the amount of fructose you're consuming. That means you'll need to carefully read labels and avoid high fructose corn syrup, agave syrup, crystalline fructose, and even sugar. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, topic number 5. You know what time it is? What time of year it is? It's the lawn time, except for you in the South. You've been mowing your lawn all this time. At numerous hardware and big box stores, just a hop, skip, and jump from the U.S. District Court in San Francisco, you can buy a truckload of Roundup if you wanted to. But anyone who's privy to the goings-on inside Judge Vince Cabria's courtroom is going to think long and hard before even touching a bottle of the weed killer. More than 700 plaintiffs including farmers, gardeners, and landscapers who once used Roundup without a second thought, are blaming its active ingredient glyphosate for the fact that they now have cancer. This is, however, far from your typical lawsuit. Despite the numerous findings over the years clearly linking glyphosate to cancer, Cabiria will be the first judge ever given the opportunity to make a court decision on that fact. And that could mark a turning point for Monsanto's billion-dollar baby, a chemical that has cut a path of destruction not only across America's heartland, but also through our own backyards. The idea that glyphosate can kill more than just weeds isn't new. 3 years ago, a branch of the World Health Organization called the International Agency for Research on Cancer, considered the gold standard in research, identified the chemical glyphosate as a probable carcinogen. Other studies have linked it to kidney and liver failure, obesity, irritable bowel disease, Alzheimer's, and Parkinson's. But it seems that no matter what scientists reveal about the health risks of using this chemical, it keeps right on selling. Not just to farmers either, but to schools, businesses, weekend gardeners, and everyone in between. Hopefully the hundreds of cases now waiting to go to trial will put an end to glyphosate's reign as the best-selling herbicide in the world. Believe it or not, it still brings in close to $4 billion a year for Monsanto, which is likely how the company is able to afford its army of attorneys. But before the case goes forward, various experts have been asked to give testimony so that the judge can determine whether there's enough science to prove in a court of law that this widely advertised weed killer caused all those cases of non-Hodgkin lymphoma. While that might sound like a typical legal maneuver, it's much more than that. What's going on is a high-stakes gamble, and if Monsanto loses, it could mean a game over for Roundup. And I bet a lot of you got it in your garage. So far, during the media-dubbed Science Week, Cabiria has heard from dozens of experts on both sides of the fence. Professor Peter Ritz from the University of California at Los Angeles told the judge that enough Roundup is used in Iowa each year, get this, for example, to coat every square mile of the state in nearly 90 pounds of the chemical. Ay, ay, ay. But guess what? All of that glyphosate doesn't just stay in Iowa or any other location for that matter. The chemical is used on hundreds of commodities, many of which are genetically modified frankenfoods such as corn, canola, and soy, with tons of corn being grown in Iowa. As for other non-GMO crops such as wheat and oats, I broke the news to you several years ago. Monsanto has been encouraging farmers to use Roundup on them as a drying agent just prior to harvest as well. Because of that, glyphosate residual has been found on all sorts of non-GMO foods, including oat cereal made for babies. But whether Monsanto wins or loses in court, we need to make our own ruling about keeping glyphosate out of our lives and off our dinner tables. The best way to do this is buying organic whenever possible, especially where corn is concerned. You can also find processed foods bearing the non-GMO Project Verified stamp. And when you see all of that Roundup on the store shelves, do what I'm sure all those cancer patients are doing who are suing Monsanto, which is leave it right there where it is. And that concludes our top 5. Let's move on to a couple of testimonies. Dr. Harry, New Zealand, it's on its way. We have been getting extraordinary results, and now more people are wanting to try your product. That's all because of you, and I just want to say thank you so much. Your product is helping us achieve our goal, and that is to help our people get well. Then we'll move on to other indigenous cultures around the world. Your product just saved the life of a 79-year-old man who the doctors had told him they couldn't do any more for him. Those doctors are now looking at the product. He is on 6 scoops a day. Also, my uncle, who was on the verge of no return, is now looking so amazing that he doesn't look like he was ill at all. I just wanted to say thank you. Anyway, that 70-year-old man's family now want the product, and I just don't have enough for everyone. Well, thank you for that, Grace from New Zealand. I also got a nice letter from a lady called, what's her name? Ruth Robinson. And Ruth says this: Dr. Harry, thank you very much. Words are inadequate and enough at how to express my profound and heartfelt thanks to the Cardio for Life and for the book that you have specifically given me. God's richest blessings to you and your business, to you and your family. She writes a whole thing here, where is it? Saying that my book is on her nightstand right next to the Bible. She thinks it's the second most important book because I do write some spiritual and a lot of verses in the book. So she thanks me for that book. That book is available for only $9.95. It sells it on Amazon for $19.95, but if you go to our website, healthguardian.com, it's only $9.95. And I give it away any chance I get. So if you email me a testimony or, just call me and say, Doc, I can't afford it, I'll send you an autographed copy of my book because I want to get it out there. I'm not about making money on the book. I just want to get it out there. That information is so important. And that concludes our top 5. Wasn't that great? I'll see you next month. But until then, God bless you all. And remember, as the world's smartest man says, be healthy, my friends. Till next time, Dr. Harry saying, thanks a lot.